This Family Life News podcast is made possible by the support of listeners like you.
It's the Noon Report from Family Life, bringing a Christian worldview to what's happening in New York, Pennsylvania, across the country, and around the world. Weather with Kevin Williams, plus special features and reports with the Family Life News team. Now, here's what's happening.
Good afternoon. Thanks for checking in. It's day 3 of the dock workers' strike.
If it goes a few days, there won't be much of an effect.
But says economist Mark Goldman, if it lasts longer,
we'll definitely have higher prices, and we might have empty shelves.
The strike already appears to be prompting some panic buying, much like we saw during the days of COVID. Mark Mayfield continues our coverage.
The strike has closed down ports along the East Coast and the Gulf of Mexico, leaving thousands of shipping containers on the docks. While ships remain idling offshore, there are reports that some retailers are seeing a greater demand for things like paper products and disinfectant sprays.
Tens of thousands of longshoremen are off the job at 36 ports from Boston to Houston. Doug Lazader at Fox News.
President Biden has called this a man-made disaster at the ports, but the White House is coming down on the side of workers, refusing to order them back to work for a cooling-off period.
The dock workers are demanding a 77% pay hike over 6 years and an end to automation, robots doing their jobs. Helene's death toll continues to climb. The hurricanes now claim nearly 200 lives in 6 southern states. Hundreds more remain missing. Nearly a week after the storm, much of the South is in desperation mode.
Everything people see on the news, it's worse in person. It's worse.
Janice Dean with Fox Weather says rivers of water have turned into mountains of mud, with dozens of communities still cut off from the outside world.
We still don't know the scope of the human death toll and the destruction because it's really hard to get into a lot of these areas. So it's a story we're going to be covering for the weeks and the months ahead.
President Biden took an aerial tour of Asheville, North Carolina yesterday. He'll be in Georgia today surveying the damage.
I'm here to say the United States, the nation, has your back.
More than 1 million people still have no power in the South. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, admits it's running out of money and may not have enough money to cover another natural disaster like Helene. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
The hurricane season runs through the end of November. Last week, Congress provided FEMA $20 billion. Last year, DHS was awarded over $500 million to help communities provide assistance to illegal immigrants.
They have taken the FEMA Emergency Food and Shelter Program and over time siphoned off hundreds of millions of dollars into basically making it an illegal immigrant resettlement program.
Former Florida Attorney General Ashley Moody is questioning why money went to illegal immigrants when people in the South today are struggling to survive following Hurricane Helene. Donald Trump's taking issue with that bombshell report from special counsel Jack Smith on the 2020 election. Lays out a timeline for how the former president allegedly tried to claw his way back into power. Trump says the report is an attempt by the Justice Department to weaponize American democracy and interfere in the 2024 election. The U.S. State Department urging Americans to get out of Lebanon as soon as possible. This as Israeli forces step up their ground war to root out Hezbollah terrorists. Correspondent Richard Engel gets reaction from the White House.
The administration is pushing to prevent a regional war, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is already in one. We are in the middle of a tough war against Iran's axis of evil, which seeks to destroy us, he said. In Tel Aviv overnight, a new attack This time, drones from the Houthis, a Yemeni militia supported by Iran.
8 Israeli soldiers have been killed in the ground war in southern Lebanon as the street-to-street fighting intensifies. The Jewish state also bracing for further violence as the holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur approach. Monday marks the one-year anniversary of the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. The Marine veteran accused of killing a homeless man on a New York City subway appearing in court today. Daniel Penny charged with manslaughter for the death of Jordan Neely, a Michael Jackson impersonator with mental illness. Penny says he placed Neely in a chokehold after Neely began screaming and threatening people on that subway. The Tigers, Royals, and Padres have all advanced in the MLB playoffs, leaving just one wild card series yet to be decided. He swings and drives one out towards right center. Taylor back. It's gone. Garrett Mitchell's 2-run home run last night gave the Brew Crew a 5-3 win over the Mets in Game 2. The designated hitter said afterward his mindset during that at-bat was not to hit a home run.
Pass it to the next guy. I mean, that was my mentality. I'm not trying to hit a homer there. It's a nice result, obviously, but my thought is pass it to the next guy.
Decisive Game 3 is tonight in Milwaukee. We'll have more in sports coming up with Randy. Also ahead on the Noon Report, local professor weighs in on the dock workers strike. New York champions prenatal care, and is it fair? Private schools competing against public ones in high school sports.
Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Williams. A nice autumn day is underway. Where do we go from here? Well, we'll talk about that in the forecast coming up in 10.
All right, Kevin, nice to see the sun shine again. Thank you very much. Let's check the stories making news where you live. Jury selection begins today in a high-profile cattle stealing case out of Niagara County, New York. An animal rights activist from Newfane refused to return 2 beef cows that had wandered onto her property 2 years ago. That activist, Tracy Murphy, now facing petite larceny charges. She's rejected a plea deal that would have avoided jail time. Murphy's facing up to a year behind bars and a $1,000 fine. A Penn State professor of supply chain management says the dock workers' strike will start to hit consumers where it hurts if it's not resolved in the next few weeks.
It remains to be seen what'll happen when and if the strike continues till that long. My sense is if it lasts more than about 2 or 3 weeks, there's going to be immense pressure on both sides to come to a mutual agreement, whether that comes from the Biden administration or that comes from their customers and suppliers.
Professor Brent Moritz is most concerned about perishable items stuck on ships out to sea, fruits and vegetables, for instance.
The Port of Wilmington handles about 75% of the banana imports in the U.S. There aren't other ports around that could easily handle the refrigerated, specialized needs of those kinds of things. That's difficult to reroute.
Moritz says the job action, however, should not interfere too much with the upcoming Christmas shopping season.
The retailers have planned for Black Friday and the holiday shopping season. Most of those goods are already in the U.S. and are already there. So it's probably not going to be impacting Christmas gifts all that much.
Nearly 50,000 port workers are on strike demanding higher wages and a ban on automated equipment. It's the first strike of its kind in nearly 50 years. There was a fatal accident this morning in Gallitzin, Pennsylvania, involving a school bus and another vehicle. No children were on the bus at the time. The Cambria County coroner was called to the scene just before 8 a.m. A 17-year-old Buffalo boy is in critical condition after being hit by a garbage truck yesterday while on his way to school. Chelsea Swift with WGRZ TV.
According to witnesses, the City of Buffalo sanitation truck backed up into a student crossing the street. One resident says this accident will impact the neighborhood.
It's sad. I feel like drivers should pay more attention to who's on the road instead of just driving for themselves.
We're still waiting to hear back from the Buffalo Public Works Commissioner to learn more about the driver of the sanitation truck.
The 46-year-old driver has been suspended. Buffalo police and the Erie County District Attorney are investigating the accident. The ACLU is suing Luzerne County, Pennsylvania, over its decision not to use ballot drop boxes in the November election. Last month, Luzerne County officials announced they cannot afford to staff those drop boxes. Luzerne County residents can still vote by mail, but they need to put those ballots in a mailbox, not a drop box. The first of two debates between Pennsylvania Senator Bob Casey and his Republican rival Dave McCormick will happen tonight. ABC 27 in Harrisburg will host the debate. Veteran political news reporter Dennis Owens will moderate. New York's Governor Kathy Hochul signed a series of bills to protect women during pregnancy.
One piece of legislation will allow pregnant women to enroll in health insurance policies at any time without penalty or fees. A second requires commercial health insurers to cover prenatal vitamins and human donor breast milk. New York recently initiated first in the nation paid prenatal leave. Sarah Harnish, Family Life News.
Governor Hochul's also signed into law a new bill to combat problem gambling. That law requires all advertisements for sports betting include warnings about the potential harmful effects of gambling. New York already requires advertisements include a problem gambling hotline number. Governor Hochul says there will be increased police presence at synagogues, mosques, and critical transportation hubs during the upcoming Jewish holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
We have to be prepared for every single scenario. And for that reason, I have directed our state police superintendent, James, to increase state police patrols at at-risk areas. You'll also see increased law enforcement presence at all critical infrastructure hubs, including major transit centers.
Monday marks the one-year anniversary of the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel. There are protests planned to mark that anniversary. There's been an uptick in vehicle thefts in recent years. It's a crime that cops admit they're having a hard time keeping up on. Pennsylvania police spokesman Blake Ioria says car thefts are more commonplace in the fall and winter.
As the weather gets cooler, people start to keep their car unlocked and warm up their vehicles during the colder months, leaving their keys inside.
He says you should always lock your vehicle regardless of whether you live in the big city or the small towns, and he says park in well-lit areas. Syracuse has just shut down the iconic Crown Plaza Hotel, one of the largest in the Salt City. That 20-story building is being converted into luxury apartments. Mayor Ben Walsh says the closure caught him off guard.
We've known for quite a while now that their intention was to close the hotel and undertake a redevelopment of new housing project. But again, the timeline was a surprise.
Guests and employees of the hotel say they did not get a heads up either about its impending closure. The tourism agency Visit Syracuse now working to find those hotel guests other accommodations. And new fairness in high school sports legislation has just been introduced in the Pennsylvania House. It urges the Pennsylvania Interscholastic Athletic Association to establish separate playoffs for public and private schools. Democrat Scott Conklin says private schools have an unfair advantage over the public ones because private schools can recruit athletes from other districts. We've got more sports next. It's the 2-minute drill on the Family Life Noon Report.
Good afternoon, I'm Randy Snavely. Bob, the Mets and the Brewers are heading to a Game 3 in a winner advances and loser goes home scenario. That's because 20-year-old Jackson Chourio was not ready to go home. The Milwaukee rookie bashed 2 home runs, including the game-tying one that came in the 8th inning. And then a few hitters later, Garrett Mitchell hit a 2-run shot to give the Brew Crew a 5-3 win. The deciding game tonight in Milwaukee. Well, you have to wonder if the Houston Astros are regretting letting A.J. Hinch go. The now Detroit Tigers skipper guided them to a 5-2 come-from-behind victory over the Stros that ended their season. Andy Ibanez had the big hit in the game. He came on to pinch hit in the 8th inning and promptly hit a 3-run double to shoot the Tigers into the next round against the Cleveland Guardians. Another higher-seeded home home team will be packing up their gear until next spring. The Baltimore Orioles dropped their second straight game to the Kansas City Royals, and again, another pitcher's duel. KC won at 2-1. The Royals will visit the Big Apple on Saturday to play the Yankees in an ALDS series. For the Orioles, they'll have to wait at least another year to try and win their first playoff game since 2014. And the San Diego Padres swept the Atlanta Braves 5-4 to move on to face the Dodgers this weekend. The Padres scored 5 runs in the second inning. Manny Machado a 2-run double, Jackson Merrill a 2-run triple, and that won it for the Fathers. And tonight, it's an NFC South showdown as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers clash with the Atlanta Falcons in the Thursday night football matchup. That is a look at sports.
Okie doke. Thank you, Randy. And still to come on the Noon Report, life after Helene, Lebanon aftermath, and day 3 of the dock workers strike.
Welcome to Breakpoint, a daily look at an ever-changing culture through the lens of unchanging truth. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet. Last month, 7 pro-life protesters were convicted of engaging in, and I quote, civil rights conspiracy and violating the Clinton-era Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, or FACE. The protesters were arrested in August 2020 after standing in front of an abortion clinic in Sterling Heights, Michigan. Combined, the 7 face up to 11 years in prison and $250,000 in fines. Now, one of those who were found guilty is a woman named Eva Edel, an 89-year-old widow from South Carolina who survived a death camp when she was young. She first came to the U.S. in 1955 at the age of 20 after fleeing a government-led ethnic cleansing in Yugoslavia. The target was the Danube Swabians, a German-speaking ethnic group to which her family belonged. As she recounted recently to the Daily Signal, Eva's mom decried the injustice they faced there, saying, quote, "We haven't done anything wrong. Who would harm us?" But when Eva was 9, she and her parents, her sister, and her brother were all rounded up by government soldiers, loaded on a cattle car, and taken to an extermination camp. The prisoners were forced there to share the same living quarters and a single outhouse. Adults were forced to work, but also kept on the brink of starvation. One day, while working in the fields, Eva's mother escaped on a wagon under a pile of grain. Soon after, she returned to help rescue her family. It was in 1968, after moving to America, that Eva was introduced to the atrocity of abortion. It was during a discussion in her English class when a fellow student declared that abortion should be legalized. This was before Roe v. Wade. After that, Eva said, "I just brought up the subject all the time because it bothered me that people would actually think of killing their own children," end quote. In the fall of 1988, after about 2 months of pro-life protesting following the Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, about 400 protesters were arrested outside of abortion clinics there. Eva was shocked by the scene, but also compelled to do something. Likening abortion clinics to her own experiences in the death camps, Eva recalled, and I quote here, "When we were rounded up to be killed, we were placed in cattle cars. Our train was headed toward the extermination camp. What if citizens of my country would have overcome their fears, and a number of them stood on those railroad tracks between the gate of the entrance to the death camp and the train? The train would have to stop. And while the guards on those trains would be busy rounding up the ones that were in front of the train, another group could have come in, pried open our cattle car, possibly set us free." But nobody did. It was later that year of 1988 that Eva joined a peaceful protest herself in Atlanta, and she was arrested for the first time. Today, she's been part of more than 50 rescues. That's what she calls the protest, and has been arrested about just as many times. Having immigrated from the tyranny of post-war communist-controlled Yugoslavia, Eva said she'd never imagined that she would be imprisoned for protecting innocent lives in this country. Quote, "America, in my eyes, was this country of justice and opportunity and everything that's good. A beacon for us over there that didn't know what all that meant because we had nothing but oppression from whoever was ruling us at the time. Human life is sacred. Government does not have the authority to permit what God forbids, and murder is forbidden by God," end quote. Did you know that in the few years since Roe was overturned by the U.S. Supreme Court, the Department of Justice has indicted 40 pro-life advocates, charging them with FACE-related crimes? Please pray for Eva and the protesters across the country now being persecuted for standing for life. For the Colson Center, I'm John Stonestreet with Breakpoint. Today's Breakpoint was co-authored by Jared Hayden, and for more resources to live like a Christian today, go to breakpoint.org.
Thank Thank you, John. Let's head outside next. Kevin Williams.
Here is your family life weather forecast for this afternoon. Plenty of sunshine, high temperatures, low 70s, dropping back toward 50 tonight, starlight. Tomorrow, sunshine giving way to some cloudiness. There'll be an afternoon shower in parts of western New York and northwest Pennsylvania. High temps, low to mid 70s, and then mostly sunny on Saturday, a bit cooler, high in the 60s to near 70.
All right, thank you, Kevin. This is the Noon Report. I'm your host, Bob Price, and here's what's happening Thursday, the third day of October. It's day 3 of the dock workers' strike, and it's starting to create uncertainty about food prices and the U.S. supply chain.
Dock workers remain on the picket lines, calling for increased wages and protections against automation. Experts say this strike is costing the economy billions of dollars a day as containers filled with goods sit idle. Governor Kathy Hochul.
It's not time to be panic buying groceries or other products.
About 4,500 dock workers in New York are part of the strike. Scott Pringle, New York.
House Majority Leader Steve Scalise says the dock workers' demands are excessive.
In the House, we're surely not going to support some kind of deal that says no automation. Imagine that. They want to go back to the Flintstones. I mean, I would bet you they've got more technology and automation in their homes, in their refrigerator, in their smart TV than they want to have on a dock. And they still have humans, by the way, who actually run the devices. These automated devices aren't running themselves.
In addition to an end to automation, the workers want a 77% pay hike over 6 years.
They're already making, with overtime, over $200,000 a year. And they want to shut the economy down to get more. At some point, who pays for this? And this will add even more to inflation.
Scalise says President Biden could end the strike by invoking the Taft-Hartley Act. It's been almost a week now since Hurricane Helene, and already it'll go down in history as the deadliest storm to strike this country since Katrina in 2005.
The death toll for the region now approaching a staggering 200. Nearly half of those deaths are here in North Carolina, and there are still dozens of towns that are only accessible by either air or mule when it comes to supplies.
Correspondent Sam Brock in hard-hit Swannanoa, North Carolina, 30 miles outside Asheville. President Biden will tour the hurricane damage today in Georgia. The federal government says it's running out of money to help homeowners recover from hurricanes.
Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas says the Federal Emergency Management Agency is meeting immediate needs, but does not have enough funding to make it through hurricane season. He said another hurricane is expected to hit the U.S. before the season ends on November 30th.
Tanya J. Powers reporting. Special counsel Jack Smith shedding new light on his 2020 election interference case against Donald Trump. Smith argues the former president resorted to crimes to try and stay in power. Trump calls the report a weaponization of the government. Its release comes just 33 days before the 2024 election. The U.S. is making plans to get Americans out of Lebanon. Reporter Jonathan Savage.
Dozens of U.S. troops deployed to Cyprus are putting together a plan to get Americans out of Lebanon if need be. Israel's conducting airstrikes against Hezbollah across the country, and fighting is taking place on the ground as well. China has already evacuated 200 people from Lebanon. Many European countries, such as the UK, are urging their citizens to leave now.
Several Israeli soldiers have been killed in southern Lebanon as the ground war gets underway. Reporter Nate Foy has the latest from Tel Aviv.
Israel's now encountering real resistance from Hezbollah on the ground. 8 soldiers were killed yesterday and several more seriously injured after an ambush in southern Lebanon.
The IDF currently engaged in street fighting with Hezbollah guerrillas. Israel bracing for further violence as it prepares to mark the Jewish holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Monday marks the one-year anniversary of the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel. There's a new study out on church attendance, and the results are not good.
Researcher Ryan Burge has been analyzing data from the Cooperative Election Study, and it reveals that among self-identified evangelical Christians, only 31% say they go to worship services at least once a week. 10% show up at least once a month, while 13% only make it once a year. The polling data also reveals that 10% of self-identified evangelicals never attend church services. That's up from 3% in 2008.
Correspondent Michael Harrington. Scientists have mapped the entire brain of a fruit fly. Research published in the journal Nature shows more than 50 million connections between over 140,000 neurons or nerve cells inside that particular insect. This neurobiological breakthrough should help experts better understand how brains are wired and what makes for healthy brain functions. The brain of a fruit fly, by the way, is less than 0.04 of an inch wide. You're listening to the Noon Report for Thursday on Family Life.
It's Faith Under Fire from Family Life News, when we invite you to listen to the voices from today's religious battlefields. Our guest is Sarah Prentice of Feminists Choosing Life of New York, and she gives us a pro-life perspective on recent news that New York's Planned Parenthood is having money troubles.
Planned Parenthood of Greater New York announced that it will be temporarily pausing abortions after 20 weeks gestation due to a lack of sedation resources, and that they intend to temporarily close down approximately 4 New York City area clinics, and it just says due to financial constraints and budgetary issues. While it seems like it will be helpful and encouraging for unborn lives, it's also a tell that those opposing the violence of abortion might need to keep a closer eye on Planned Parenthood, because in the state of New York, it's extremely easy to be an abortion provider. The state's 2024 fiscal year budget allocated over $100 million for increasing abortion providing services. And so when we look at how Planned Parenthood is the largest and most well-funded abortion-related nonprofit, despite its nonprofit status, they received over $670 million in government funding that year, with their net assets amassing to over $2 billion. It's absolutely dumbfounding that Planned Parenthood would cite financial constraints and budgetary issues as a reason for them shutting down these clinics when it is clear that they have so much money.
So what does that tell you as you look in from the outside? Is it truly a budgetary squeeze that is causing them to change these things, or are there other factors that are having them curtail some of these abortion-providing services?
I think it seems reasonable to believe that this may be because of the proliferation of chemical abortion in the U.S. and statewide. According to the Guttmacher Institute, Planned Parenthood's research arm, medication abortions accounted for 63% of all U.S. abortions in 2023, which was a 10% increase from 53% in 2020. And it's estimated that approximately 1 million abortions occurred in the year of 2023. In the state of New York, it's currently legal for retail pharmacies to mail abortion pills with a prescription via telehealth. Walgreens has started providing medication abortions in New York. In addition to that, New York State passed a law that required all SUNY and CUNY campus schools with health clinics to be able to provide the abortion pill to students. So when we look at how pharmacies and college campuses can now make the abortion pill more readily available, and then we combine this with a lack of legislation requiring in-person visits, we see that clinics no longer become as necessary. And under the current rules surrounding chemical abortion in the U.S., pregnant women and girls can take the medication to induce an abortion up to 10 weeks of pregnancy without a pre-abortion ultrasound. This is very concerning because pre-abortion ultrasounds are the best way to root out ectopic pregnancies, a situation in which if the chemical abortion pill is taken will be lethal to the life of the mother. It can be. And they also help determine what week of the pregnancy the woman is in. And so because they're suggested to not take the pill past 10 weeks of pregnancy, those ultrasounds are really important. But with the proliferation of chemical abortion and the abortion pill, all of these things aren't happening anymore. We can assume that the clinics are not as necessary.
And let's talk about those chemical abortions, the do-it-yourself, stay-at-home pill that are becoming more numerous. That doesn't mean that there are fewer babies having their pregnancies ended in New York. It's a question of how they're being done. And for you at Feminists Choosing Life of New York, you're not only concerned about the baby, you're concerned about the mother. We've heard research about maybe 1 out of 10 women who take these pills end up in the emergency department because they do need some kind of intervention or follow-up care?
Yeah, and another sad thing about the abortion pill is that the women are given the pill, they go home with it, or now it's possible that it can be mailed right to their house, and they take the pill, they have the abortion, and they do it alone in their own home, in their own bathroom. And if there is a medical emergency, they have to handle that situation by themselves. There's no doctor or clinician around to address the situation if it does go wrong. These are problems that need to be addressed and they need to be talked about, because if the chemical abortion pill is more readily available, it is possible that these issues can likely increase as well.
Sarah Prentice is Deputy Outreach Manager and a policy analyst with the group Feminists Choosing Life of New York. I'm Greg Gillespie, and this is Faith Under Fire from Family Life News.
Hi, Greg. Thank you very much. Faith Under Fire comes your way Thursdays during the Noon Report or online anytime, familylife.org. Just look for the news tab on our podcast page.
Good afternoon. Here is your Family Life regional weather forecast. All is rather serene on the weather scene. A nice autumn day is underway. We're tracking a cold front, though, eastbound from Michigan, and it will generate a shower for some later tomorrow, but nothing special. The high pressure builds in for some nice weather as we head into the weekend, although a more potent front spells late Sunday night showers and a little bit of a fall chill next week. But for this afternoon, plenty of sunshine, high temperatures, low 70s, dropping back toward 50 tonight, starlight. Tomorrow, sunshine giving way to some cloudiness. There'll be an afternoon shower in parts of western New York or northwest Pennsylvania. High temps, low to mid 70s, and then mostly sunny on Saturday, a bit cooler, high in the 60s to near 70.
All right, thank you, Kevin. Finally at noon, a South Carolina man wasn't about to let a hurricane stop him from attending his daughter's wedding. Now, he's got quite the story to tell as we hear from Family Life's Brian Query.
In the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, David Jones embarked on an extraordinary journey to ensure he could walk his daughter down the aisle on her wedding day. What should have been a 2-hour drive from South Carolina to Johnson City, Tennessee, turned into a grueling 12 and a half hours. When he crossed into Tennessee around 2 a.m., he was told roads were impassable. With nothing but his cell phone light to guide him, Jones set off on foot through pitch-black debris fields and knee-deep mud. Jones said he was praying fervently as he struggled to get through until a miracle appeared in the form of a truck who drove him the remaining 8 miles. Against all odds, Jones arrived on time to walk his daughter down the aisle, and the emotional moment wasn't lost on Elizabeth, who was deeply moved by her father's dedication.
That's so emotionally moving that my dad loves me that much, that he would come and go through all of that to get to my wedding.
A father-daughter bond that no storm could stop. Brian Query, Family Life News.
What a great story. Thank you, Brian. And that's our world. The world we live in, Thursday, the 3rd of October. I'm Bob Price. Family Life News.
You've been listening to the Noon Report, heard weekdays on Family Life. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to this Family Life News podcast. If you've been encouraged by what you've heard, please share it with others and click the subscribe button to automatically receive future episodes. Family Life is a listener-supported ministry. Podcasts like this are made possible by your financial partnership. Find out more at familylife.org.